The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The elevator climbs. Through the transparasteel wall, the Battle of Coruscant burns. Republic cruisers and Separatist destroyers trade fire across the upper atmosphere, and the light from each impact strobes across Anakin Skywalker's face in slow, arrhythmic pulses. Gold, then white, then nothing, then gold again. Obi-Wan is talking. Anakin hears the words. He always loved the sound of that voice, even when it was lecturing him, even when it carried that particular note of patient exasperation Obi-Wan had developed specifically. Anakin had always suspected, for him. The voice is doing something easy right now, something warm. A joke about R2 and the battle droid's severed head, or perhaps the smell in the elevator shaft, or perhaps the sheer indignity of being captured in the first place. He can't quite track it, because he is not breathing right. The realization arrives not as thought, but as sensation, a wrongness so total it bypasses language entirely. His chest expands, fully, both sides. No resistance, no mechanical assist, no rhythmic hydraulic hiss timing each inhalation like a metronome set by someone else. Air moves in and out of him the way it is supposed to, the way he hasn't felt it move in 23 years, and the shock of it is so complete that for 3 full seconds he simply stands there and breathes. In, out, both lungs. His hands come up without a conscious decision to raise them. He stares at them. The left hand first, flesh and blood, unmarred, tendons shifting visibly under the skin as he flexes his fingers one by one. Real. His. The left hand he has had since birth, and which has existed, for 23 years, sealed inside an armored gauntlet he could never remove. The right hand is different. It always has been. The prosthetic glove. The same one it has been since Geonosis, synthetic nerves feeding sensation up through pathways that are not quite his own. A mechanical precision that responds to thought without being thought. The particular quality of a hand that is his, and not his, simultaneously. He knows this hand. He has known it for 3 years. But knowing it inside a black armored sleeve behind half a meter of insulation and durasteel and vacuum seal is nothing like knowing it here, uncovered, responsive, light. He flexes the prosthetic fingers. They move. The knowledge sits in his chest like something has been removed that he forgot was there. Not pain, its absence. He is breathing without assistance in a body that is mostly his own, and even the part that isn't feels closer to himself than anything he has inhabited in over 2 decades. He is 22 years old. No, he is 45 years old, in a body that is 22, and the gap between those 2 numbers contains everything, every nightmare, every corridor of the executor walked alone at 3 a.m, every name on a list of people he killed, every moment of his son's face in the second before he threw the Emperor into the reactor shaft and felt his own body give out at last. 45 years of that. Every gram of it. Sitting inside a chest that has been breathing unassisted for the last 30 seconds without his permission. Obi-Wan says his name. Anakin turns. He is not prepared for this. He knew, in the abstract, that this moment would come. Obi-Wan alive. Obi-Wan standing 2 feet away. Obi-Wan looking at him with the mildly quizzical expression he reserved for moments when Anakin went quiet without explanation. He knew it intellectually. He did not know what it would do to his body when he actually saw it. Obi-Wan is 38 years old. The beard is shorter than Anakin remembers from his last memory of it, shorter than the weathered thing it became in the desert years. His eyes are the same clear gray blue they always were, carrying that particular quality of attention that made you feel, when Obi-Wan looked at you, like he was reading the page behind your face. He is reading that page now. The hand comes up before Anakin can stop it, a half-reach, an instinct with 23 years of momentum behind it, the reflex of a man who spent 2 decades rehearsing what he would say if he ever got 1 more minute. The hand stops, he pulls it back, lets it fall to his side. Not yet. Not here. Obi-Wan's head tilts a fraction of a degree. Anakin, not a question. Just the name, held a beat too long, measuring whatever it is he's seeing on Anakin's face. "You've gone quite pale. I'm fine. You look like you've seen a ghost." He almost laughs. The specific inappropriateness of that sentence, directed at him, in this moment, nearly breaks something open that he cannot afford to have broken. He breathes instead. In, out, both lungs. He finds the discipline that 23 years in a black suit forged into something structural, something that holds weight without showing strain. And he puts it to work. "Just the drop," he said. "The elevator." "I'm fine." Master Obi-Wan watches him for another half-second. Then the corner of his mouth moves, not quite satisfied. Not quite convinced. But willing to table it for now, because the mission is the mission, and there are more pressing things than whatever is happening to his Padawan's face in a lift. "Right," he said. "Stay sharp. Dooku won't make the same entrance twice." "He will," Anakin does not say. He makes the same entrance every time. He drops from the upper balcony, left side, 3-point landing, and he opens with a Makashi feint to your outside guard. The elevator slows. The doors open onto the observation deck of the Invisible Hand, and the air that rolls in carries the smell of ozone and scorched upholstery, and something beneath both of those things that Anakin identifies immediately and without needing to name. Him. It smells like him. The Force signature is enormous, a deliberate suppression blanketing the room like a hand pressed flat over a wound. But Anakin spent 2 decades as that man's apprentice, and no amount of concealment makes the presence unfamiliar. He felt it from inside the elevator. He's been feeling it since the moment his consciousness slammed back into this body, and the Force reconnected around him like every nerve-ending firing at once. Sheev Palpatine sits at the far end of the chamber, wrists bound by ray-shielded cuffs, posture arranged with exquisite precision into something that communicates helpless dignity. The gray robe. The concerned, relieved expression. The eyes that have the quality. Anakin can see it now, can see it clearly with everything that he knows, of a man watching a play he scripted himself. "Anakin Skywalker," Palpatine said, and the warmth in his voice is so practiced it would have worked on him once. "I knew you would come." He did know. He arranged it. Movement. Above. The snap hiss of ignition. Dooku drops from the left side of the upper balcony. 3-point landing. Exactly, the crimson blade rises into the opening guard of Makashi, Form 2, elegant, aristocratic, designed by its originator to humiliate every other form of combat by making them look crude by comparison. The Count's expression carries its usual tone, of a man tolerating something beneath him. He looks at Anakin the way he always looked at him in those early years, like a student who showed occasional promise, but hadn't yet earned the right to be taken seriously. Anakin ignites his saber. The blue blade climbs into the space between them. Obi-Wan, to his left, ignites his own, and in that half-second before the engagement, Anakin feels Obi-Wan register something. Not a word. Not even a thought he could put into language, just a quality of attention that shifts, sharpens, turns slightly sideways, the way a man turns his head when a familiar piece of music begins in an unfamiliar key. He is standing differently. Anakin is standing differently. And Obi-Wan, who has catalogued every centimeter of Anakin Skywalker's combat stance for the better part of a decade, knows it immediately and doesn't know what to do with that knowledge yet. There is no aggression in the stance, no lean forward, no weight coiled in the front foot, no jaw set against a rising tide of anger looking for somewhere to go. Just weight distributed evenly across both feet. Shoulders dropped. Blade held at a guard angle that could transition to any of 6 responses with equal efficiency. The stance of a man who has already fought this duel. Dooku attacks. Anakin is already moving. Not to meet the strike. To be where the strike isn't precisely, his body redirecting a half-second before the blade arrives at the space he just vacated. A response timed so exactly to the incoming attack that it shouldn't be possible for a man seeing it coming for the first time. It is not the first time. At the far end of the chamber, Palpatine watches this with an expression of quiet, proprietary satisfaction, the look of a man who believes he is watching his investment perform exactly as intended. He has never been more wrong about anything in his life. Anakin does not look at him. There will be time for that conversation. Right now there is Dooku, And the duel and the careful work of managing an outcome that Anakin has already seen and decided, 23 years of nightmares behind him, will not happen the same way twice. His blade rises to meet the next strike with total eerie calm. Obi-Wan watches and does not know what he is watching, and cannot look away. Dooku fights the way old money moves through a room. No urgency, no waste. Every step placed with the assurance of a man who has never once needed to hurry, because the outcome has always been settled before the first move. Makashi is a dueling form built on that premise, the assumption that elegance is sufficient, that a blade guided by 70 years of absolute mastery will find its mark regardless of what the opponent brings, because no opponent has ever brought enough. He opens with the same sequence he always opens with. Anakin knows this the way he knows his own pulse. A diagonal cut at the outside shoulder, not meant to land, meant to test the parry. Then a redirection off the expected block, dropping the blade's angle, probing the low guard. Then a short thrust at the center, Makashi's favorite geometry, the line that exists between every opponent's hands when they haven't closed their guard quickly enough after the redirect. Dooku throws all three in the first 4 seconds. Anakin parries the shoulder cut before it completes, steps inside the redirect before it redirects. Has his blade already at center line when the thrust arrives, catching it with a rotation of the wrist that requires almost no force, because he is meeting it at exactly the right angle, at exactly the right moment. Dooku's eyes change, not his face, his eyes. A faint constriction around them, a quality of attention suddenly and completely revised. He recovers. He is too good not to recover. 70 years of discipline don't evaporate because one counter surprised you, and he transitions out of the opening sequence into something less predictable. A lateral cut. A step change in rhythm. The tempo dropping for 2 beats and then accelerating hard on the third. Anakin accommodates it. Not perfectly. He is not performing perfection, that would be its own tell, a red flag even brighter than what Dooku is already clocking. He lets the lateral cut graze his guard, lets his footwork look like adjustment rather than anticipation, keeps the reading of each strike buried beneath the surface of what a 22-year-old body in a reactive fight is supposed to look like. The effort of this is harder than fighting Dooku at full extension. It requires him to calculate 2 duels simultaneously, the one he is winning and the one he is pretending to barely survive. Obi-Wan moves on Dooku's right flank. In canon, this is where they separate. Dooku collapses the flanking approach early, driving Obi-Wan back and pinning Anakin in single combat until Dooku can isolate each of them. Anakin tracked that sequence from inside the darkness of Vader for 2 decades, reviewed it in his memory the way men in cells review the catastrophe that put them there. Searching each moment for the point where different would have been better. He knows exactly when the ceiling moves. A support column on the upper level, weakened by an earlier weapon's impact, destabilizes at the 7th minute. Dooku doesn't need to force push it. The vibration from the ship's impacts does it for him. The column tilts, the attached section of upper balcony rail follows, and 200 kilograms of architectural debris drops toward the spot on the deck where Obi-Wan is standing, and in the original sequence Obi-Wan can't see it, because Dooku's blade is at his throat demanding his full attention, and the angle is wrong. Anakin feels the structural shift through the Force 3 seconds before it happens. He doesn't look up. He doesn't telegraph anything. He steps left, extending his free hand, and the debris reverses. Not deflected, reversed, every kilo of it, seized mid-fall and pushed back up and aside in a single firm arc of telekinesis, deposited against the far wall with a sound like a closing door instead of a collapse. He doesn't break his engagement with Dooku for the half-second it takes. The debris is gone, and Obi-Wan never had to move for it, and the entire exchange takes less time than a breath. Silence, except for the duel's rhythm. Then Obi-Wan, blade still locked against Dooku's, says it quietly. Not panicked. Obi-Wan never panicked mid-combat, just precise. The way he asked questions in a sparring hall when something needed naming. Anakin, how did you focus? Anakin said. Not cold. Not sharp. Just firm. The word of a man who needs another man to stay present because there isn't room right now for the conversation that question would open, and Obi-Wan, to his credit, does exactly that. He drops back into the fight. He files the question somewhere behind his eyes where it will keep. Dooku presses harder. The adjustment in his attack pattern is subtle. Makashi shortens its extensions. The attack's becoming more compact, more economical, designed now for a different hypothesis. He has revised his read of Anakin Skywalker from reckless prodigy to something he doesn't have a category for yet. And a man without a category fights more carefully while he builds one. Anakin lets him build one that is almost entirely wrong. He concedes 2 exchanges deliberately. Lets Dooku's blade get close enough on the second to leave a scorch mark across the upper sleeve. Not skin, but close. Lets his footwork look slightly ragged on the recovery, like effort rather than precision, like a younger fighter drawing on reserves rather than a veteran managing his output. Dooku sees what Anakin needs him to see, a very gifted opponent who is nonetheless operating at his ceiling. Nobody fights at their ceiling without anger. This is the thing Dooku cannot reconcile. He was briefed on Anakin Skywalker. He fought Anakin Skywalker on Geonosis. He knows the signature of that combat style with the intimacy of a man who nearly took a hand to it. The aggression that builds progressively through a fight, the emotional fuel that makes him accelerate as the stakes rise, the characteristic recklessness that has gotten him and his master out of impossible situations through sheer refusal to acknowledge that they're impossible. None of that is here. What is here is something cooler and stranger. The boy engages like a man who has fought 3 wars and retired, who comes to combat the way a surgeon comes to a procedure, fully attentive, precisely calibrated, with a quality of stillness at his center that should not exist in a 22-year-old in a life-or-death duel aboard a burning ship in the middle of a battle for the Republic's capital. Dooku increases pressure again. A faster combination, 6 strikes, 5th one a genuine attempt at the kill, not a probe. Testing what happens when the quality of the threat escalates. Anakin takes 5 on his blade and steps around the 6th, rotating inside Dooku's guard, and for one moment they are almost chest to chest, close enough to speak without raising a voice. And Anakin looks at him, past him, through him, with the eyes of someone looking at a man he has already buried. Dooku disengages. 1 step back. For the first time in a very long career, he is not certain he is the most dangerous thing in the room. He recalibrates, widens his engagement to draw Obi-Wan back in, buying himself space to think, using Makashi's footwork to reset the geometry of the fight. Elegant, correct, the response of a master doing exactly what a master does when an assumption fails. Revise and continue. The ship takes a hit below decks. A sustained rumble travels up through the floor, and the overhead lighting flickers once, twice, holding on the 3rd cycle. Somewhere in the lower levels, an alarm begins. The fight narrows. Anakin watches Dooku's footwork reach a specific configuration, right foot forward, weight just slightly overcommitted to the back transition he's been using to reset after every 3rd exchange. He has done this precise reset 17 times in 4 minutes. The 17th time, Anakin tracks it in the Force, feels the exact moment the weight transfers, and moves. Not a killing strike. A disarm. Precise, targeted, Dooku's blade hand takes the leverage point. Wrist, not blade. The technique stripping the weapon cleanly without severing anything, flinging the red lightsaber sideways across the deck in a single tight arc. Dooku's hands are empty. He stands there breathing. His eyes go to his empty hand, then to his saber on the floor 3 meters away, then to Anakin, slowly, with the expression of a man reassembling a world view that has just lost its load-bearing wall. Anakin does not raise his blade to Dooku's throat. He lowers it. The choice hangs between them like a spoken word. At the far end of the chamber, Palpatine rises slightly from his chair, a subtle lean forward, an almost imperceptible quickening. The proprietary excitement of a man who believes the moment he has engineered for 13 years has finally arrived. He is waiting for the execution. He is waiting for Anakin Skywalker to do what Anakin Skywalker does, to take the step across the line, to prove the theory, to become the thing he was shaped to become. Anakin sheathes his saber. The hum dies. And says nothing. The silence after the blade goes out is the loudest thing in the room. Palpatine recovers first. He always does. 70 years of Senate maneuvering have made the recovery instinct faster than conscious thought, the smile resettling, the posture reshaping itself into wounded dignity, the voice finding its register in under a second. Anakin. Warmth, concern, a father's voice. What are you doing? He must be destroyed. You know this. Anakin turns to look at him. Not the look Palpatine is expecting, not the conflicted glance of a young man caught between obligation and instinct, wavering, susceptible to the next nudge in the right direction. Something else. Something that looks at Palpatine the way a man looks at a building he once lived in and watched burn, with recognition, with memory, with a specific, intimate knowledge of every room inside. No, Anakin said. Just that. No volume, no edge. The word dropped into the room the way you drop something heavy from a great height, not thrown, simply released, certain of where it will land. Obi-Wan's head turns. He is still breathing hard from the duel, blade still lit. Eyes moving between Anakin and Dooku and the still kneeling Count with the rapid calculation of a man trying to locate the variable he missed. Anakin, give me a moment, Master. He steps forward. Not toward Dooku. Toward the chair. Each step deliberate. The walk of a man crossing a room he has crossed 10,000 times in memory, and is crossing for the first time in the real. Palpatine watches him come with an expression that is doing considerable work. Confusion layered over concern layered over the very first suggestion, not yet conscious, of something recalibrating behind the eyes. Anakin stops 4 meters away. You're going to tell me, he said, that he's too dangerous to be left alive. You're going to remind me of the Jedi Code. You're going to suggest that the rules don't apply here, that this is war, that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same thing. He pauses. You've said all of it to me before. Different rooms, same argument. Palpatine's expression holds. A remarkable performance. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean, my boy. My boy. The phrase lands in Anakin's chest like a coal. 23 years ago it would have lit something in him. The hunger for a father's approval that Palpatine had identified and exploited with the patience of a man who understood that the right wound, tended correctly, never quite healed. He knows exactly what that phrase cost, exactly what it purchased. Darth Sidious. Anakin said. The name, spoken aloud in this room, does something to the air. Obi-Wan goes absolutely still. Palpatine's face does the thing it does, the thing Anakin watched it do once before, on the night everything ended, the mask not dropping so much as being quietly set aside, like a coat removed in a private room. The confusion smooths out, the concerned furrows release. What remains is older and quieter and carries, beneath the stillness, something that might almost be curiosity. He doesn't speak yet, giving nothing, taking the measure of what just happened the way you take the measure of a structural crack, locating it, tracing its length, estimating what it can tell you. Anakin turns to Dooku. The Count is still on his knees, unarmed, breathing controlled. Aristocratic composure held in place through what Anakin recognizes as genuine effort. The effort of a man keeping his face neutral while his mind runs very fast in a very small space. His eyes are on Palpatine. Have been since the name was spoken. He told you the war would end, Anakin said to him. Not unkindly, just plainly, the way you state a known fact. Once the Republic fell and the new order was established, that there would be a place in it for you. Senior counsel, perhaps, a role befitting a man of your stature. Dooku says nothing. A muscle in his jaw moves once. He told you the rule of two was a temporary architecture, that when the Empire was built the old limits wouldn't apply anymore, that you'd earned something different. Anakin lets that sit for a moment. He's been saying variations of that for over a decade. He says it differently to each person. But the structure is always the same, just enough truth to make the lie load-bearing. The boy is speculating, Palpatine said. Still mild, still warm. A doctor gently correcting an anxious patient. Anakin, whatever you believe your mandate to Dooku was issued 6 weeks before the Battle of Geonosis, Anakin said. Private channel, encoded in a frequency the Jedi don't monitor. You told him that if the Jedi interfered at Geonosis, acceptable losses included Master Kenobi. Those were the words. Acceptable losses. Obi-Wan makes no sound. You told him the clone army's command inhibitor protocol had a secondary trigger built below the primary architecture. You called it a contingency, something only you could activate. You said it would never be necessary if everything went to plan. He pauses. You told him that 17 months ago, in this ship, over a private channel, before you sent him here to start this. The silence that follows is different from the one before. Dooku's eyes move to Palpatine slowly. The way you move a limb you aren't sure still belongs to you. Deny it, Dooku said, very quietly. To Palpatine, not a demand. Almost a request, the specific quiet of a man asking for something he already knows isn't coming. Palpatine looks at him. Half a second. One full second. His eyes carry, in that window, something that is almost fond, the brief, unguarded look of a man regarding a piece he genuinely admired before it became inconvenient. Then the look closes. He says nothing. Dooku breathes in through his nose, out through his mouth. The count of a man performing arithmetic on something that cannot be made to add up correctly regardless of how many times he runs the numbers. The retirement, he said. The council roll. The new order. Palpatine's expression is tranquil. There was never going to be a retirement, Dooku said. Not a question. Still that same quiet, almost academic tone. A man finishing his own sentence. I was always the variable that needed eliminating when the equation was complete. He looks at his own empty hands. He was always going to be the one to do it. Here, today, that was the plan. Count. Obi-Wan starts. Don't. Dooku's voice doesn't rise. He looks at Obi-Wan with the expression of a man who has very little patience remaining for well-intentioned interruptions. Then, he looks at Anakin. A long look. The kind of look that is making a significant number of revisions simultaneously. How do you know what you know? He said. That's a longer conversation, Anakin said. And we don't have time for it right now. Something moves in Dooku's expression. Not warmth. Warmth would be the wrong word for anything that lives on Dooku's face. But a species of recognition. One careful, unsentimental man looking at another and locating the thing they have in common. He betrayed the Jedi because he couldn't stomach their hypocrisy. Their willingness to serve a corrupt republic while telling themselves they served something higher. He left because lies wrapped in principle were still lies, and he had more pride than to pretend otherwise. He walked into the dark, because at least the dark didn't claim to be something else. He traded one lie for a worse one. The floor of that knowledge is not there. He reaches for it, and there is nothing. Obi-Wan is looking at Anakin now, has been looking at him for the last 60 seconds with an expression that has moved through several distinct phases. Shock, calculation, something almost like vertigo, and settled into a quality of attention that is very still, very focused and asking a question his mouth hasn't shaped yet. He trusted Anakin Skywalker for 10 years, trained him, argued with him, fought beside him, buried his concern about the darkness he sometimes felt moving under the surface of that brilliant, complicated light. What he is feeling from Anakin right now is not darkness. It is not the old static, not the pressure of an emotion too large for its container. It is something he doesn't have a name for. Still, clear, and carrying the specific weight of something that has already been through every worst thing and come out the other side. He doesn't say any of this. At the far end of the chamber, Palpatine uncrosses his legs. He does it slowly, and the quality of the movement is different from everything that came before it. The frailty gone. Not performed away but simply no longer necessary. The posture reorganizing itself around a different center of gravity. When he stands, he is not the same man who was sitting in the chair. He looks at all three of them. The expression on his face is not anger, not fear. It is, unmistakably, relief. Dooku's saber is across the room. He looks at it. 3 meters of deck plating between his hand and the hilt. And Palpatine standing between them with that new posture. The one that has nothing left to perform, nothing left to conceal. And the arithmetic is simple. 3 meters. A man who has spent 70 years doing exactly one thing with his hands. The saber flies. Not thrown. Summoned, the hilt crossing the distance in under a second. slapping into his palm with the clean finality of something returning to where it belongs. The red blade ignites, and Dooku stands, and for the first time in over a decade his lightsaber is pointed at the man who recruited him. The word master feels wrong now. He discards it. Palpatine looks at the blade for a moment, then at Dooku's face. Something moves in his expression. Brief, genuine, perhaps the closest thing to sentiment he is capable of. The look of a man acknowledging, without warmth, that a piece he valued has made its final move. "Dooku," he said. Mild, almost gentle. The same voice he used in 100 private meetings aboard 100 ships, the voice that had guided and shaped and wound Dooku like a mechanism for over a decade. "You're making a mistake. I've been making one for 13 years, Dooku replied. "I'm correcting it." He steps to Anakin's left. Not close, 3 feet of space between them, enough room to work. But the alignment is unmistakable. Obi-Wan, after a single moment of recalibration that Anakin quietly notes takes less time than he might have expected, steps to Anakin's right. 3 blades. Blue, blue, red. Palpatine looks at the configuration with the expression of a chess player examining a board that has produced an outcome his model said was impossible. He is running the calculation. Anakin can see it. The same micro-expressions he catalogued across 23 years of proximity, the slight downward flick of the eyes that means the variables are being reassigned. Then, very quietly, he smiles. "I have to admit," Palpatine said, his voice now lower. The Senate warmth entirely gone from it. Something older and more genuine settling into its place. "I didn't anticipate this particular arrangement." His eyes moved to Anakin. "You've been busy." "We all have," Anakin said. "Indeed," the smile holds. "Tell me, and I ask purely out of professional curiosity, how long have you known?" "Long enough." "How specific?" He tilts his head a degree. "Longer than today, I think." "The elevator, perhaps?" "Your face when the doors opened." He pauses. "Or longer than that?" Anakin says nothing. Palpatine nods slowly, filing the non-answer exactly as accurately as an answer. That is the thing about him. The silences give him as much as the words, sometimes more. Anakin spent 23 years watching him do it and still, even now, feels the pull of it, the pressure to fill the space, to say something, to give him the variable he's looking for. He doesn't fill it. Obi-Wan, at his right, speaks instead. His voice is careful, precise, the voice he uses when he is feeling something large and keeping it at a usable distance. "Anakin, I need you to understand that there will be a considerable number of questions after this." "I know. I'm not angry. I know that too. I simply want to establish that whatever is happening, whatever has been happening, I am standing here, with you, right now. A beat. We can address the rest later." Anakin has to look away from him, finds a point on the wall and holds it. The knowledge sits in his chest like a stone, that this man, in another version of this moment, died on a sand planet, saying "I loved you" and there was nobody with him at the end. He holds it where it is. Later, everything is later except the next few minutes. "I appreciate that," he said. "Stay close." Palpatine stops waiting. There is no wind-up, no performance, no theatrical announcement of the hostilities commencing. One moment, he is standing with his hands at his sides, the picture of an elderly man in a gray robe 3 feet from 3 lightsabers. The next moment he isn't standing anywhere. He's moving. And the Force moves with him in a way that doesn't look like Force used so much as weather, a sudden pressure change in the room that arrives half a second before he does. Dooku catches the first strike. Barely, the impact rocks him back 2 steps, and Anakin notes it. Sidious hits with more raw force behind each blow than Dooku telegraphed in their entire exchange earlier, the power differential between a Sith Master performing restraint and a Sith Master performing nothing stark and immediate. The blade lock lasts 1 second before Palpatine disengages and redirects toward Obi-Wan in the same motion. The transition's so fluid it reads not as 2 separate actions but as one continuous line. Obi-Wan meets it. Sorasu, Form 3, the defensive form, built specifically for exactly this situation. A single practitioner absorbing an overwhelming offensive threat. The geometry is precise. Small movements, maximum coverage. Each parry redirecting rather than blocking. The whole system designed to wait out an attacker who fights with Palpatine's style of overwhelming pressure. It buys 4 seconds. Anakin comes in from the right flank. Palpatine doesn't look at him. Doesn't need to. A hand extends toward Anakin without breaking the blade engagement with Obi-Wan, and the Force hits Anakin square in the chest, not lightning, a shove. 60 years of telekinetic mastery expressed as pure directed pressure, and Anakin goes back 3 meters and uses the momentum to roll rather than fall, coming up on one knee with his blade already raised. The wall behind him has a new crack in it. Dooku re-enters the engagement. The 3-on-1 geometry is working. In theory, Palpatine cannot hold all 3 quadrants simultaneously, cannot engage all 3 attack lines with equal attention, and the overlapping threat forces him to divide his focus in ways that should, over time, accumulate into openings. In theory. In practice, he is 2 steps ahead of where theory says he should be. He reads the triangulation and collapses it, pressing hard at Dooku, forcing him back, until the angle closes. Then pivoting to face Anakin and Obi-Wan on a single axis. The 3-point formation becomes a 2-point formation becomes, briefly, a single-point formation as Dooku resets his footing after the hard retreat. He is not using all of it yet. Anakin knows this. He has seen, in memory, in the dark of 2 decades of sleeplessness, what all of it looks like. He is not all of it yet. He is still assessing, still revising his model of what Anakin is, and what this configuration means, and whether his current strategy is the correct one for an opponent he doesn't have a category for. The psychological calibration is still running. Anakin can see it in the way Palpatine's eyes return to him between exchanges. Not threat assessment. Something more specific. Like a man checking the answer to a question he hasn't finished asking. Then he speaks. Mid-combat. Matter of fact, addressing Anakin the way you address someone across a workbench. Future memories. He deflects Obi-Wan's thrust, disengages, creates 2 feet of space. That's the only explanation that coherently accounts for your behavior today. Something showed you what was coming. A pause while he redirects Dooku's follow-through. Or someone. Anakin doesn't answer. I'm curious what you saw. His footwork shifts, opening his angle toward Obi-Wan's left side, testing a new approach without fully committing. Specifically, about him. The blade comes at Obi-Wan's left side, not the tentative probe Anakin would expect from that setup, but a genuine committed strike. Aimed not to injure but to extract data, watching to see if Anakin's reaction to an incoming threat against Obi-Wan carries the specific foreknowledge of a man who has watched that particular blow land. Anakin is already moving before it arrives. He intercepts. Clean, precise, taking the blade engagement himself and holding it for the 2 seconds it takes Palpatine to disengage. And in those 2 seconds they are close enough for Palpatine to read his face, and whatever he reads there settles something in his expression. He knows. He knows what Anakin knows. Now. And the knowing produces in him not fear, but a quality of focused, almost appreciative attention. The look of a man revising his strategy because the opponent finally revealed something real. He steps back, looks at all 3 of them. Well, Palpatine said, and his voice carries in it something that hasn't been there before. The particular serenity of a man who has stopped managing the room and started simply inhabiting it. This will be interesting. His hand comes up. The lightning, when it comes, turns the room white. The lightning doesn't arc. It detonates. A full-body discharge, both hands, every volt Palpatine has held in reserve behind 3 hours of Senate performance and 13 years of careful concealment, released simultaneously outward in a sphere that has no specific target, because it doesn't need one. The observation deck is the target. Everyone in it is the target. The consoles, the viewports, the structural supports along the ceiling, the floor itself where the metal conducts and carries the charge in branching fractal lines that find every conductive surface in the room and lights them simultaneously. Anakin takes it on his blade. The current climbs the lightsaber, not deflected, absorbed. The plasma column conducting the charge up through the hilt and into his hand and arm, and the pain is significant and immediate, and he holds the blade steady, because dropping it is not an option. His teeth lock. His arm shakes once, hard, the way a tuning fork shakes when struck. He holds. Dooku takes it differently. He goes sideways, not retreating, stepping out of the primary cone, taking the peripheral discharge on his shoulder and upper chest, the current visible for a half-second as a white outline around his silhouette before he rolls clear. He comes up breathing hard, one hand braced on the deck, and the expression on his face is the first genuinely unguarded thing Anakin has seen on it. It is fury. Old, precise, and very cold. Obi-Wan catches the edge of the sphere on his left side and goes down on one knee, blade down. The Ceresu guard dropped for the 3 seconds he needs to absorb the impact. He is up again before Palpatine can capitalize. The footwork is slightly different coming out of the kneel, compensating for something, the left knee taking the floor wrong. And he doesn't show it in his face, but Anakin feels it in the force beside him. He files it. Adjusts. The observation deck looks different than it did 60 seconds ago. 2 of the viewport panels have blown outward. The lightning found the stress fractures in the transparent steel, and the pressure differential did the rest. Wind comes through both breaches simultaneously. Not a gust, but a sustained roar. A constant low voice underneath everything else, pulling at loose material, at clothing, at the smoke rising from the scorched consoles. Outside those breaches, visible now without the transparent steel mediating it, the Battle of Coruscant continues in complete indifference to what is happening in this room. A Republic cruiser burns 2 kilometers off the port side, its midship section venting atmosphere in a slow, silent spiral. Laser fire crosses the distance between capital ships in straight, bright lines. The ship takes a hit somewhere below. The floor registers it as a shudder, brief, like a body absorbing a blow it absorbed correctly. Palpatine stands in the center of the room and looks at all 3 of them. The smile is different now. The Senate smile, the one designed to reassure, to include, to make the recipient feel specifically chosen, is entirely absent. What has replaced it is simpler and older, and carries none of the warmth the other one manufactured. He looks the way a man looks when he has finally been allowed to stop pretending to be something less than he is. Almost comfortable. Ceresu, he said, directing it at Obi-Wan with the conversational ease of a professor noting a student's choice of method. Reliable, appropriate, given the circumstances. His eyes moved to Dooku. And you, returning to the form you favored before other ambitions intervened. Interesting choice. Nostalgia is a luxury for men with futures. Dooku's jaw sets. He says nothing. Palpatine's eyes come to Anakin last. They stay there. I want to understand something, he said, crossing the space between them with unhurried footwork, the saber moving in small tight patterns at his side, not idle, never idle. Always the feints that aren't feints until they are. In whatever you saw, whatever sequence of events produced the version of you standing in this room, did I fight you? Personally? Anakin moves with him, tracking the footwork. Once, and you won. Something in Palpatine's expression acknowledges this with what might, on a different face, have been modesty. Well, he attacks. The sequence is nothing like what he used against Dooku or Obi-Wan. He revises entirely. The opening move a lateral body feint that has no defensive function, and no obvious offensive one either, designed not to threaten, but to make Anakin commit to a read before the actual strike arrives. Juyo's signature, emotion weaponized, unpredictability as the primary instrument, the form that requires its practitioner to be genuinely comfortable with chaos rather than performing comfort with it. He is genuinely comfortable with it. Anakin takes the feint correctly, doesn't commit, waits the extra half beat, and meets the actual strike when it comes, but the angle is wrong in a specific way that costs him a step to the right. And the follow-up is already there waiting at the new angle, and he takes that on a redirected parry that gets his blade across in time but barely. The engagement closer than anything Dooku produced in 20 minutes of trying. The first crack in the foreknowledge. He lived one duel against Palpatine. One sequence, in a throne room, in a different body, 2 decades from now. The specific choreography of that encounter lives in his muscle memory the way all muscle memory lives. Available, reliable, but calibrated to a context that no longer applies. This Palpatine, in this moment, has not made the same choices that produced that duel. The variables are different. The form he's using is different. He cannot predict this. He can only fight it. Dooku and Obi-Wan come back in, the triangulation reformed, the three-point geometry re-established around Palpatine's position. Palpatine doesn't collapse at this time. He lets it stand and operates within it, the three-sided pressure absorbed through footwork alone, moving the center of the triangle so that he is never equidistant from all 3 points simultaneously. Always slightly closer to one than the other two, keeping the optimal engagement angle in constant motion. He nearly gets Dooku. A lightning strike, small, targeted, not the full discharge but a precise bolt at Dooku's blade hand that comes between parries, in the gap between one exchange ending and the next beginning. Dooku's reflexes are extraordinary and his blade comes up in time, but the deflection is imperfect, and the residual current runs up his arm, and for 2 seconds his sword hand is unreliable, the grip weakened, the fine control gone. Palpatine takes the 2 seconds and pushes. A force shove at Dooku's sternum, calculated to the threshold, hard enough to put him down, not hard enough to kill him. Because Dooku dying here is a variable Palpatine is not ready to spend. He still has uses for Dooku as a variable, not as an ally, never again as an ally, but as a piece he can sacrifice at the correct moment for the correct return. Dooku goes back, stays up. Then he almost gets Obi-Wan. This one is more elegant. He creates the opening himself, a deliberate overextension on Anakin's side, an attack that commits more than it should, designed to make Obi-Wan's Soresu instinct redirect rather than simply deflect, which shifts Obi-Wan's weight fractionally forward, which opens his high guard for the half-second it takes to launch a thrusting strike at his shoulder. Testing. Anakin understands. He is testing whether Anakin moves to protect Obi-Wan from a threat he shouldn't be able to see from his current angle. Anakin doesn't intercept. He force pulls a section of shrapnel from the destroyed console, a flat piece of housing, palm-sized, and puts it in the strike's path from 6 meters out. It catches the thrust. Deflects it. The shrapnel drops. The exchange closes. 3 seconds of quiet fighting. Palpatine's head tilts a degree. He noticed. Specific foreknowledge, he said, not quite to Anakin, not quite to himself. Working through it. Selective, not total. He parries Dooku's return without looking at him. You can't see what I do next, can you? You can see what matters to you. His eyes find Anakin's over-the-blade engagement. You see him. The ship convulses. Not the rolling shudder of sustained fire, a single hard impact, something structural, below and aft. The deck doesn't just register it. It tilts, 4 or 5 degrees, enough to feel it in every joint, enough to make footing suddenly a conscious problem. A sound comes up through the floor that is not an explosion, but a process, something long and load-bearing beginning, slowly, to fail. The overhead lights die. Emergency amber takes their place 3 seconds later, and the observation deck in emergency amber looks like a different room, shadows deepened. The smoke from the ruined console suddenly visible as a slow ceiling, the 2 open viewports now framing the battle outside in hard orange light. Palpatine stands in the middle of it. He is breathing slightly harder than he was 4 minutes ago. Not winded, not diminished. The breath of a man who is operating at considerable output and is comfortable there. He looks at the 3 of them and the ambient evidence of structural distress around them, and does the calculation with the speed of a man who has run parallel calculations his entire life. The ship, he said. Yes, Anakin said. A beat. How long? Not long enough for you. Something moves across Palpatine's face then. Not fear, not panic, nothing so legible as either of those. The expression of a man who has spent 7 decades treating every variable as manageable and countering, for the first time, a variable he did not place there himself. The floor groans beneath them. He attacks. The floor tilts. Not dramatically. Not the catastrophic lurch of a ship in final descent. A slow incremental shift. 2 degrees, then 3, like the whole room is a table with one leg shorter than the others, a wrongness that takes the body a moment to register, and then cannot be unfelt. Loose debris begins to migrate. A section of console housing that was resting against the far wall starts moving, slowly, toward the lower end of the deck. The smoke along the ceiling shifts direction. Outside the breached viewports, the horizon is wrong. Coruscant's cityscape, which should be below them, has drifted 15 degrees off vertical. The ship is yawing. Slowly, incrementally, the invisible hand beginning the long process of becoming something that falls rather than something that flies. None of the four people in the room look at it. Palpatine changes his approach so cleanly that it takes Anakin 2 exchanges to identify what has changed, and another full exchange to understand why. He stops attacking Anakin. The shift is surgical, not a retreat, not a disengagement, just a reallocation of primary threat. He keeps Anakin occupied with the minimum engagement necessary, blade meeting blade with the mechanical efficiency of a man performing maintenance rather than combat, and directs the actual weight of his attention across the geometry of the room toward Obi-Wan. Anakin recognizes the logic immediately and feels it land somewhere below the level of tactical analysis. Palpatine cannot overpower him quickly enough. Dooku is a known quantity, manageable, exploitable, the blueprints for his eventual defeat already drawn and filed. But Obi-Wan Kenobi is Anakin's specific wound, the one Palpatine identified years ago and has been pressing with 2 fingers ever since. And a man fighting to protect someone he loves is a man who can be made to make mistakes. The next exchange makes the new strategy clear. Palpatine feints at Anakin, a short, sharp cut that demands a response, and when Anakin's blade moves to answer it, he's already pivoted, the momentum transferred sideways into a full committed strike at Obi-Wan's center. Not a probe. Not a test. A killing attempt, clean and direct. The strike of a man who has decided to spend the resource. Obi-Wan meets it. Soresu holds. The impact knocks him back a step. His left knee, the one that landed wrong, takes the weight of the backward step, and something in his expression compresses briefly before it smooths out again. Palpatine doesn't miss it. A second strike. Same target. Not the center this time, the left side, angled to force Obi-Wan's weight onto that knee on the defensive pivot. A very specific cruelty. Anakin comes across the engagement. He takes the strike on his own blade from an angle that requires him to cross in front of Obi-Wan's position, putting himself between the incoming line and its target, absorbing the full force of the blow through his arms, and driving both blades upward and out in a redirect that clears the space. It works. It costs him a position. He's out of the triangulation now, standing between Obi-Wan and Palpatine on a single axis. The 3-point geometry collapsed into a line, and Dooku has to work quickly to re-establish the 3rd point from the other side. Dooku moves. He is slower than he was 20 minutes ago. Not visibly, the form is still intact. The footwork still correct. The blade still placed with aristocratic precision. But the current from the lightning strike has left something behind in his sword arm, a reduction in fine control that shows up not in the gross motor function but in the recovery speed after each exchange. A quarter-second delay in the reset that wasn't there before. Palpatine has noticed. He angles toward Dooku, briefly, just long enough to make the threat apparent. To make Dooku shift his guard and commit weight to his left foot, and then redirects back to Obi-Wan with a speed that the anticipated angle made completely invisible until it was already happening. Obi-Wan takes a hit. Not the blade. The Force, again, targeted. Not a sphere this time, but a column. A focused push at his chest that compresses rather than flings. And Obi-Wan absorbs it through his legs and doesn't go down but takes 2 involuntary steps back, and the left knee buckles for a half-second before it locks and holds. Dooku says, "Kenobi," one word, flat and without warmth, and he's already moving into the gap that Obi-Wan's displacement created, taking the engagement line, giving Obi-Wan the second he needs to reset. Not generosity. Tactical necessity. But in the doing of it there is something, a choice made quickly, instinctively, for the benefit of the man beside him, and Anakin notes it without comment. The ship drops. Not a tilt this time. An actual drop, a half-second of near freefall as something in the propulsion system below them gives up a function it was performing. The deck comes back up hard, and every person in the room absorbs it through their legs. the four of them in different configurations, and the debris that was migrating slowly toward the low end of the deck now slides fast, a percussion section of metal fragments crossing the floor. Palpatine doesn't stumble. He converts the drop into a jump, a short hop, timing the impact, using the deck's return to add force to a downward strike at the new point of vulnerability in the formation. He is coming down at Anakin from above, the angle impossible to properly meet from a standing position on a deck that just lurched. And the calculation is good, the angle is real, and Anakin makes a decision in the fraction of a second available. He doesn't parry, he sidesteps and lets it land on empty deck. The blade hits floor and the discharge kicks back through Palpatine's guard, not damaging, just resistant, and the half-second of recovery is enough for Anakin to get his blade back between them. The room is deteriorating around them. 2 of the emergency amber lights have failed, reducing the illumination to the remaining panels and whatever light comes through the breached viewports. The fires along the ruined consoles have found new fuel, the wiring behind the wall panels, exposed by the lightning damage, and are burning with a patience that suggests they are not going out on their own. Smoke is no longer migrating toward the ceiling. It is building there, a slow, dark accumulation. Anakin is bleeding, not significantly. A cut above his left ear where a piece of shrapnel found him during the drop, the kind of wound that produces more blood than the damage warrants, and he can feel it tracking down the side of his face and does not have a hand free to address it. He is aware of it the way you're aware of weather, present, noted, not yet a problem. He has taken 3 other minor contacts. 2 on the blade arm, absorbed through the guard, bruising rather than cuts. 1 across the ribs, shallow, from Palpatine's tip on a passing redirect. None of them are limiting function. All of them are information. He is not invincible. He never was. Palpatine speaks again. Still in that conversational register, still addressing Anakin specifically, still testing and probing between exchanges, as though the duel and the interrogation are the same ongoing process. You were his apprentice. Not a question. In whatever future you carry. For how long? Anakin doesn't answer. Long enough to know how I fight. Palpatine continues, redirecting Dooku's attack with a minimal parry, not even looking at him. Long enough to know the ship's timeline. Long enough to know Dooku's exact psychology well enough to break his loyalty in 3 minutes. He creates space, resets his footing on the tilted deck. Years then, many years. Obi-Wan, 2 meters to Anakin's right, says nothing. Anakin can feel what that silence is doing to him, the information arriving in pieces, each piece requiring a revision of something he thought he understood about the last 10 years. He has the discipline not to show it in his fighting. He shows it nowhere except in the quality of his silence, which is a different quality than the silence before. Dooku makes a decision. Anakin feels it before he sees it. A shift in the force around Dooku, a weight being set down, the specific settling that precedes commitment. He has reached the end of something. The calculation that produced that ending is not visible from the outside, but its conclusion is, he stops conserving himself. The quarter-second recovery delay disappears because he stops managing around it. Stops protecting the arm, lets it hurt and uses it anyway. He attacks Palpatine with everything he has left. Not strategy, not aristocratic geometry, just force, directed and sustained, the complete inventory of 70 years applied in a single unbroken sequence. It is extraordinary, and it is desperate, and it drives Palpatine back 4 steps before he can establish a counter that holds. Palpatine holds it. He looks at Dooku over their locked blades, and his expression carries, briefly, something that reads almost like respect. The aesthete in him recognizing the quality of the thing being thrown at him, even as he refuses it. He gathers lightning in his free hand. Anakin moves, not fast enough. The bolt takes Dooku in the chest. The ship screams below them, a long structural sound, metal finding its limit, and the floor tilts past 5 degrees, past 8, the angle now impossible to ignore. Dooku doesn't fall. He steps back once. His sword arm drops to his side. He breathes. He looks at Anakin. The floor is at 12 degrees now. Everything that isn't fastened has chosen a side. The debris field has consolidated along the low end of the observation deck. Console fragments, shrapnel, A section of ceiling panel that came down during the last structural impact. A slow accumulation of everything the ship is shedding as it loses the argument with gravity. The fires along the wall panels have found each other. They are no longer individual. They are a condition. Dooku stands at the center of it with his blade still lit and his sword arm at his side, and his breathing doing the careful, measured work of a man who is managing something internal that he will not put on his face. The lightning hit him in the chest. Not the periphery, not the shoulder, not the deflected edge of a bolt intended for someone else. The full discharge, center mass, the kind of contact that doesn't leave a mark so much as leave a before and after. He is standing because standing is a choice, and he is still capable of making it, but the inventory of what his body can currently do has been significantly revised in the last 10 seconds. He knows what the inventory says. He has known, in some part of himself that does clear-eyed accounting without sentiment, since the lightning made contact. He does the arithmetic with the same aristocratic precision he has applied to every problem in 70 years of applying aristocratic precision to problems, and the arithmetic comes out the same way each time he runs it. He doesn't run it a third time. Palpatine stands 8 meters away and looks at him with the expression of a craftsman examining work that is nearly complete. There is no cruelty in it, no satisfaction beyond the functional. He is looking at Dooku the way he looks at every finished thing, noting its completion, already considering what comes next. "You should sit down, Dooku," he said. "No," Dooku replied. Very simply. The response of a man declining an offer he found mildly insulting. Anakin moves to close the distance. Palpatine's hand comes up, not the blade, the hand, a telekinetic press that stops Anakin's forward momentum without drama, the way you stop a door with a palm. Anakin pushes back through it, feels the resistance, finds his feet slipping on the tilted deck with inadequate purchase, and loses 2 seconds establishing footing he can work from. 2 seconds. Palpatine uses them. He crosses the 8 meters in a movement that is technically walking, and registers as something else, a compression of space. The footwork covering ground faster than its components should allow, Juyo applied to locomotion rather than blade work. He arrives in front of Dooku with his saber at extension, and Dooku's blade comes up to meet it. They hold there, blade locked against blade, the red of Dooku's lightsaber, and the red of Palpatine's creating a single crimson node between them. Dooku's arm is shaking. The sword arm, the one the lightning hit, the muscles receiving intermittent signals through damaged pathways, producing force impulses rather than the sustained application that a blade lock requires. Palpatine leans into it. Unhurried, converting Dooku's structural disadvantage into simple, incremental pressure, the blade sliding degrees toward Dooku's guard, the geometry closing at a rate that cannot be sustained against indefinitely. Dooku doesn't look at the blade. He looks at Anakin, a long look, given the circumstances, a look that has time in it, that is making several separate assessments simultaneously. There is something in it that Anakin has not seen on Dooku's face in any version of their acquaintance, not warmth exactly, but an absence of the particular cold that Dooku used as climate control. A brief moment of temperature registering at something close to ambient. Then he looks at Obi-Wan, who he left the Jedi Order before Obi-Wan was knighted, who he has spent 13 years fighting in the abstract and 3 years meeting in the field, who is standing 4 meters away with his blade up and his expression doing the thing Obi-Wan's expression does when he cannot reconcile what he's seeing with what he knows, which is to become very still and take it all in. Dooku speaks. Not to Palpatine. Not an appeal, not a negotiation, not the aristocratic bile Anakin expected. He speaks to the room, or perhaps to some fixed point only he can see, his voice carrying the dry, uninflected precision of a man reading minutes into a record. "I left the Order," he said, "because I believed it had become an instrument of a corrupt institution rather than a moral counterweight to one." The blade lock holds, his arm shaking with the effort. "I was correct about the institution. I was wrong about the alternative." A breath. "I chose the greater corruption believing it was the lesser. It is perhaps the most embarrassing error a man of my training could make." He looks at Palpatine. "I thought I knew you," he said, "to no one in particular. Decades of working beside you. I never saw the full depth of it until this room. Something moves in Palpatine's expression. Something old, unguarded, there and gone. Dooku's free hand comes up. Not his blade hand. The other one, the undamaged one, and the Force comes with it. Not focused, not precise, not the calculated technique of a man deploying a specific application. Every remaining reserve, gathered and directed in a single instant, released as raw force push at Palpatine's center mass from a distance of 3 feet. It is not elegant. It costs him everything he has left. Palpatine goes back, not down, not fully. A stagger, 3 steps. The blade lock broken, his guard open for the time it takes him to absorb the impact and reset. His footing is wrong on the tilted deck. He reestablishes it. It costs him a second. Possibly 2. Anakin is already moving. Not the careful, managed movement of the last 40 minutes. The conserved, tactical economy of a man running a long engagement. This is different. This is everything committed to a single line across the tilted deck, past the debris field at the low end. Past the node where Dooku is now on one knee with the Force reserves empty and the sword arm finally down. Past the point where tactical thinking applies. He knows this window. He knows exactly how long it is, and he knows it will not come again. Palpatine sees him. The reset completes. The guard comes back up. The blade rises to the correct intercept angle, because the correct intercept angle is always available to a man with his reflexes and his training, and the window is closing. Anakin doesn't take the line Palpatine's guard is set for. He drops, under the guard, inside the geometry, into the space that a man who fights at Palpatine's level doesn't defend, because nobody gets there. And his blade comes up from below, in a single committed thrust. It finds its mark. The sound the lightsaber makes entering and exiting at that angle is very small, smaller than anything else that has happened in this room in the last hour. Palpatine looks down. The expression on his face in that moment is not something Anakin expected. Not pain. Pain is too simple, too legible, too human a category. What moves across his face is closer to the expression of a man encountering a proof he cannot fault for the first time, working back through the logic, finding it sound. A genuine encounter with something that was not in the model. His mouth opens. Unscripted, he said, very quietly. Not to Anakin, not to anyone. Just the word, placed into the room with the precision of a man who has spent his entire life scripting everything and needs, in this final moment, to name the thing that ended it. His legs find the deck. His body follows. In the silence that comes after, a silence under the fires and the ship's structural groan, and the wind through the breached viewports, Anakin stands and breathes. In, out, both lungs. Behind him, Dooku has both hands on the deck and is not moving quickly. Obi-Wan reaches him first, not to restrain him, just to reach him, crouching beside him with a hand at his shoulder, in the manner of a man who cannot help extending the courtesy even now, even here. Dooku looks at the hand. Doesn't remove it. He looks at Palpatine. So, he said. His voice has lost none of its precision, none of its dry, unhurried register. But it is quieter than it was, quieter than Anakin has ever heard it, carrying something at its floor that might, in another man, be called peace. The Jedi won. A breath. Worse things have happened. He doesn't say anything after that. The ship drops 3 meters in a single lurch, and the fires along the wall panels surge with fresh oxygen, and somewhere in the lower levels something that was holding gives up entirely, and the sound it makes travels up through the deck and into every bone in the room. Obi-Wan is already on his feet. Anakin. I know. Anakin said. He pulls Dooku's saber from the floor. His own blade still lit in his right hand. 2 red weapons, recovered, accounted for. He looks at Palpatine once more, does not look for long. Then he turns toward the door, and Obi-Wan is beside him, and they run. The corridor is at 15 degrees and getting worse. They run uphill. That is the accurate description of what is happening. The ship's yaw has committed past the point of incremental. The invisible hand now in the early stages of its final atmospheric attitude, nose pitching forward and down, which means the corridor to the bridge runs at a grade that requires leaning forward into it, boots finding purchase on deck plating that was not designed to be a slope. Obi-Wan runs beside him, not behind, not ahead. Beside, half a step back on Anakin's right, matching his pace with the efficient ground-covering stride he has used on every surface, in every gravity, across a decade of running toward and away from things together. The familiarity of it, the specific sound of those boots, the breathing pattern, the way he takes corners by planting his outside foot and pivoting rather than slowing, reaches into Anakin and does something he doesn't have time to account for. He runs faster. The corridor branches. Left toward the crew quarters, right toward the bridge access. They take the right without discussion, without a word exchanged, the shared knowledge of the ship's layout operating between them like a third party. A section of ceiling gives up ahead of them. Not catastrophically. A panel, 2 meters of conduit housing, dropping free as the structural integrity of the overhead fails in sequence from aft to fore. It hits the deck, and Anakin goes over it without breaking stride. The jump mechanical. Practiced. The height calculated in the half-second before he leaves the ground. Obi-Wan goes around it, hugging the wall, rejoining Anakin's line 4 steps later. The bridge crew, Obi-Wan said, not winded, managing the breath between strides. Gone, Anakin said. Fled or dead when the observation deck battle started. You know that or you're inferring it? Both. A beat of running. Right, Obi-Wan said. The bridge door is sealed, emergency lockdown, automatic, triggered by the structural alarms that have been running since the second viewport blew. Anakin doesn't slow. He puts his hand against the door's locking mechanism, and the Force does the rest. The internal bolts disengaging in the wrong order at the wrong speed in a way the door's engineers did not intend, but the door cannot prevent. And it opens. The bridge is empty. Consoles dark along the left bank. Emergency power on the right. The forward viewport, a wide curved transparasteel sweep that on a functional bridge gives the command crew a panoramic view of whatever is in front of the ship, currently provides an unobstructed view of Coruscant's upper atmosphere coming toward them at a rate that constitutes a problem. The planet fills 70% of the viewport. It was not filling 70% of the viewport an hour ago. Anakin crosses to the pilot's station and takes the chair, and his hands find the controls the way hands find familiar things in the dark. Without searching, without confirming, already where they need to be, by the time the conscious mind catches up. The console reads his inputs and wakes up. Partial power, navigation and propulsion systems in various states of availability, that the display summarizes in a column of amber and red indicators that is not encouraging. He reads it in under 3 seconds. Files it. Begins, Obi-Wan takes the co-pilot station. He is not a natural pilot. Anakin knows this, has always known this. The knowledge, the private understanding of a man who has flown beside someone long enough to know exactly where their competence ends. But he is a competent one, and more importantly, he is someone who knows how to be useful in a cockpit without getting in the way of someone who is extraordinary in one. He pulls up the system's display. We're missing the entire aft propulsion section. I know. The heat shields on the lower port side are at 11%. I know. Anakin, a pause. We're also on fire. I know that too. The ship shudders. A long rolling shudder that begins somewhere in the damaged aft section and travels forward through the hull like a sentence, like the ship communicating the specific nature of its distress in the only language left to it. Through the viewport, the atmosphere thickens. They are entering the upper layers now, the first friction beginning to show as a faint luminescence along the ship's leading edges. Anakin pulls up on the attitude controls. The response is not what the controls suggest it should be. The ship's handling has the specific quality of a thing that is flying through its own structural integrity, rather than through aerodynamics. Every input producing a result that is approximately correct, and precisely wrong in ways that require immediate compensation. He compensates. The nose comes up 2 degrees. 3. Loses 1 back. Holds at +2. That's something, Obi-Wan observed. It's a start. Can we make the surface? Not a question. He knows Anakin will tell him the truth, and he is asking in the register of a man who wants the truth rather than a reassurance. Yes, Anakin said. It won't be comfortable. It never is with you. Anakin looks at him. Obi-Wan is watching the system's display with the focused attention he brings to problems he cannot personally solve but can at minimum monitor, one hand on the secondary thrust array ready to manage the outputs Anakin calls for. There is blood on his left sleeve from a contact Anakin didn't see land, the fabric darkened above the elbow. His expression is the one it always is mid-crisis, not calm exactly, because calm implies the absence of awareness of the stakes, and Obi-Wan is always acutely aware of the stakes. It is more precise than calm. Present. Completely present. Doing the next thing. Thrust, Anakin said. Obi-Wan opens the secondary array. The ship responds, not eagerly, not cleanly, but it responds. The acceleration producing a handling improvement that is marginal and significant simultaneously. Anakin takes it and uses it, adjusting the attitude, working the entry angle. 2 minutes of this. The silence between them filled with the sounds of the work, the console inputs, the ship's structural complaints, the growing sound of atmospheric friction against the hull, a low constant roar building in the way that thunder builds when it's coming from all directions. Then Obi-Wan says, "You saved my life 6 times in the last 2 hours." Anakin doesn't look away from the viewport. "I know. I'm keeping count. I know that too. It's 7, actually," Obi-Wan said. "I'm including the ceiling panel in the corridor." Something in Anakin's chest does a thing he doesn't try to identify. He focuses on the entry angle. The lower port heat shields are at 8% now, the number declining in a way that has a timeline attached to it. And the timeline requires him to rotate the ship's aspect before they hit the lower atmosphere. "Rotating," he said. He rolls the ship 40 degrees to port, redistributing the thermal load to the shields that have remaining capacity, and the viewport swings from a view of oncoming planet to a view of oncoming planet from a different angle, and Obi-Wan's hand tightens briefly on the secondary console and releases. "Well," Obi-Wan said, "that's a view. Don't look at it. I'm looking at it." Obi-Wan: "It's genuinely remarkable, Anakin. We are very high up and moving very quickly, and there is a significant amount of the ship missing. And I want you to know I have noticed all of those things." Anakin's mouth does something that, in a less dire set of circumstances, would be identifiable as a smile. "I've landed worse. Have you?" "Yes." A pause. "When?" Obi-Wan asked. Anakin considers how to answer this. The answer involves a retrofitted freighter over Mustafar, and a funeral pyre and 23 years of a life he is currently in the process of making not happen, and none of that is available for this conversation yet. "Different story," he said. Obi-Wan lets it go. He is good at letting things go when the cockpit is the only thing that matters. And right now the cockpit is the only thing that matters. The lower atmosphere arrives. The heat builds along the hull in a way that stops being abstract. It is visible through the viewport now. The plasma sheet forming along the ship's leading edges and spreading, the entire forward section wreathed in a corona that makes it look, from inside, like flying into something lit from within. Alarms consolidate into a single sustained tone that Anakin turns down without looking at the volume control. He finds the landing zone by instinct and confirmed sensor data, a stretch of dock on Coruscant's surface already being cleared by emergency response crews who can track the incoming debris trajectory and know something is coming down whether it wants to or not. The ship hits the lower atmosphere hard. The structural complaints from the hull become a voice. Sustained, forceful, the sound of a vessel that was built for space being asked to negotiate with gravity at a speed gravity was not consulted about. The deck vibrates at a frequency that migrates from feeling into hearing. Anakin holds the line. The dock comes up fast. Very fast. He bleeds speed through attitude changes rather than thrust, because thrust is largely theoretical at this point. The deceleration curves steep and getting steeper, and Obi-Wan's hand is back on the secondary console and both his feet are braced against the deck. "Anakin, I have it." He does. He has it the way he always has it. That specific quality of certainty that is not confidence so much as relationship. the ongoing conversation between him and whatever he is flying. The mutual understanding of two things in motion, figuring out together what the outcome is going to be. The dock arrives. The landing is not gentle. It is controlled, which is different from gentle, which means that everything that can be done within the laws of physics to produce a ship that stops moving and a crew that exits under their own power has been done, and the result is a long grinding contact with the dock surface that produces sparks, and a deceleration that pushes everything forward before it stops. And then there is stillness. Complete, total stillness. The alarms run for 4 more seconds. Then they stop. Anakin sits in the pilot's chair in the sudden quiet and breathes. They walk out into smoke and emergency crews, and the sound of Coruscant, traffic and sirens, and the endless ambient voice of a planet that never stops. And at the edge of the landing zone, Republic forces are arriving. Mace Windu at their front in the specific configuration of a man who came prepared for a hostage extraction and is currently revising what he thought he was coming to do. He looks at them. At the ruin of the invisible hand behind them. At Anakin. Anakin reaches into his belt and removes 2 lightsabers. Not his own. He keeps his own. He holds the other 2 for a moment. 1 in each hand. Red blades. The weapons of dead men. He sets them at Mace Windu's feet. Says nothing. Windu looks at the sabers. Looks at Anakin. Looks back at the sabers. Whatever question was on his face when he arrived has been replaced by a different question entirely. The Jedi Council chamber at mid-morning. 12 seats in a circle. Light coming through the windows in clean flat planes, painting the floor in rectangles of gold that don't quite reach the center of the room where Anakin stands. The spires of Coruscant visible beyond the glass, the city going about its business, unaware that the war ended yesterday in a burning observation deck, and a controlled crash landing, and 2 red lightsabers placed without ceremony at a master's feet. 12 seats. 11 occupied. The 12th seat has been empty for some time. Nobody has moved it. Anakin stands where he always stood in this room, in the center, without a chair, in the position the council architecture assigns to the person being addressed rather than the people doing the addressing. He has stood in this spot for judgments and commendations and assignments and reprimands. He knows the precise quality of light at this hour, the way it makes the faces across from him simultaneously more and less readable, illuminating expression while flattening depth. He knows what he is going to say. He has been deciding this since the elevator. Mace Windu speaks first. Because Mace Windu always speaks first when the subject is Anakin Skywalker, and the topic is something Mace Windu has strong feelings about. He is sitting at his position in the circle with the expression he has worn since the landing site. Not angry, which Anakin expected, but something more complex and less manageable, the expression of a man who has received information that doesn't fit into any of his existing frameworks and is refusing to file it incorrectly just for the comfort of having it filed. The Sith Lord is dead, Windu said. Confirmed, a pause waited with everything left unaddressed. Count Dooku is dead. The Chancellor of the Republic is dead. He looks at Anakin. You have 17 minutes to explain why those are not 3 separate catastrophes. They're not, Anakin said. Dooku and Palpatine were the same catastrophe. Silence in the circle. Yoda, across from Windu, has his eyes on Anakin with the quality of attention that has always unsettled Anakin slightly. Not hostile, never hostile, but bottomless. The look of a being for whom 900 years of watching provides a context so deep that what he sees when he looks at a person is not just the person but everything around them, and behind them, and possibly ahead. He has not spoken yet. He is listening to something that isn't in the room. Master Kenobi's report mentioned. Windu continued, reading from a datapad with the care of a man who wants the record accurate, that you identified Palpatine as Darth Sidious aboard the Invisible Hand before any hostile action on his part, before any evidence was produced, before any reveal. He sets the datapad down. How? Anakin breathes in. Out. I'm going to tell you something, he said, and I need all of you to let me finish before you respond. What I'm about to say is going to require you to adjust several things you believe are settled. I'm asking for the time to give you the complete picture before any of it is addressed individually. Windu looks at him. That's not a request you've ever made of this council before, he said. No, Anakin agreed. I haven't. Something in the quality of that acknowledgement, the absence of defensiveness, the absence of the low-grade friction that has characterized every exchange between Anakin and this council for the last 6 years, produces a shift in the room. Small, collective 12 people adjusting their posture by fractions. Yoda says, "Speak, young Skywalker. Listen, we will." Anakin starts with Padmé. He does not start there because it is the easiest place to start. He starts there because it is the correct place. Because the marriage is the root of everything that followed, the choice that made him vulnerable to Palpatine. The secret that bent his relationship with this council into a shape that couldn't bear weight, and he is done building on foundations that can't bear weight. He says it plainly. They were married 3 years ago, on Naboo, in secret. They have kept it secret because the code forbade attachment and the consequences of discovery would have ended both their careers. He is telling them now because secrecy was what Palpatine used, and he is not giving the next thing that comes along the same tool. The circle receives this, not well, and not badly. Several faces move. Windu's jaw sets in a way that means he is performing the internal calculation of how angry this makes him, and whether that anger is useful right now. Ki-Adi-Mundi looks at Obi-Wan, who is standing along the chamber wall, and Obi-Wan's expression gives nothing back except the specific quality of a man who is known for less than 12 hours and is still integrating it. Anakin moves to the clones. He explains the inhibitor chips slowly, with the precision of a man describing something that must be understood completely or not at all. The chips are not a rumor, not a theory. They are installed in every clone trooper currently serving in the Grand Army of the Republic. They contain a behavioral override designated Order 66. The order, when activated, will cause every clone in the field to execute their Jedi commanding officers simultaneously, without hesitation, without the possibility of refusal. The order can only be activated by Palpatine. The real Palpatine, Darth Sidious, the man who is currently deceased, or someone with access to the command architecture he built. He watches the room understand this. It takes longer than the marriage. The marriage is a violation of rules. This is a violation of the assumption that the Republic's army was ever what it appeared to be. He can see the specific moment it lands for each of them, the slight change in stillness, the intake of breath that doesn't become a word. Windu says, "How do you know this?" "I know it," Anakin said, "because I lived in a future where it happened, where Palpatine activated Order 66, and the clones followed it, and the Jedi Order was destroyed in a single afternoon, where every master in this room was killed by the troops they commanded, where you, specifically, died in Palpatine's office. The words sit in the room without support. Windu is very still. I woke up," Anakin continued, "in the elevator, approximately 2 hours before this council meeting. 45 years old, in my 22-year-old body, with complete memory of a life I have not yet lived and will not live if the next several decisions are made correctly." He pauses. "I know how this sounds. Extraordinary," Ki-Adi-Mundi said. "Not dismissive, the word used in its literal sense." "Yes, and yet," Yoda said. His voice carries its usual weight, the tone of a man who has learned to say a great deal in very few words, the compression of 9 centuries applied to each syllable. He looks at Anakin with those bottomless eyes. "Ended the war, you have. Unmasked the Sith, you have. Protected your master, and died you did not." A pause. Impossible. The result was not. Silence. Then Yoda says something nobody in the room expected. "Blindness," he said, "in this council. Speak of it I must. Before the accounting of Skywalker's actions, yes." He looks around the circle slowly. "A Sith Lord. In the Senate. For years. Decades under our noses he sat. In our meetings his influence reached. His war we fought. His clone army we commanded." His ears lower slightly, a gesture Anakin has learned to read as something Yoda does when he is saying something that costs him. "Attachment we forbade. Fear, we called it. Loss, we taught our students not to grieve. He looks at Anakin. Broken, this made them. Broken, it made you. Blind, it made us. Our own failure, we must reckon with, before we reckon with his. The chamber absorbs this. Windu breaks the silence. His voice, when it comes, has a quality Anakin has never heard in it before. Not softened. Windu's voice does not soften, but stripped of the particular edge it has always carried specifically in conversations about Anakin Skywalker. The edge born of suspicion, of a man who sensed darkness in a prodigy and could never fully resolve whether the danger was real or theoretical. It is not there now. A man motivated by love for his wife, Windu said, slowly, as though testing the weight of each word, and by the need to protect children he hadn't met yet. He looks at Anakin directly, walked into a burning ship, fought a Sith Lord who outmaneuvered every living master for a decade. A pause. And won. He picks up the datapad, sets it down again. The code says what it says, he said. The code was also written by people who never fought Darth Sidious. He looks around the circle. I'm not prepared to tell this man the rules he broke matter more than what he just did. Nobody in the circle argues. Anakin stands in the column of morning light and feels, for the first time in a very long time, the specific quality of a room that has decided to extend trust rather than withhold it, and understands, in his chest, what it would have meant to have been given this years ago. The order goes out within the hour. Emergency medical teams fleet-wide, clone trooper battalions rotated off active duty in sequence, surgical teams briefed on the inhibitor chip location and removal procedure. It moves through the Grand Army of the Republic the way a correction moves through a system, not instantly, but irreversibly. Each ship and battalion and squad logging compliance as the order reaches them. Order 66 will never be activated. It cannot be. The man who built it is dead, and the mechanism is being removed, chip by chip, from every soldier in the Republic's service. In the chamber, the meeting closes. The masters file out in ones and twos, and what they are carrying with them is not resolution. Resolution will take years. The reckoning Yoda named will outlast this council and possibly the next, but the specific weight of a thing that has been named in the right room by the right people at the right time, which is the beginning of it. Obi-Wan stays. He waits until the room is empty except for the two of them, and then he crosses from the wall to the center of the chamber. And he stands in front of Anakin with his hands at his sides and his expression doing the thing it did in the elevator, reading the page behind the face, finding things there he doesn't have categories for yet. He says, Padmé. Yes, Anakin said. You love her. 25 years, Anakin said. Give or take. Obi-Wan looks at him for a long moment. The morning light has shifted, moved off the floor, climbing the walls now, the rectangles of gold thinning as the sun moves. In this light, at this distance, Obi-Wan looks the way he looked in the elevator, alive and present and completely, heartbreakingly unaware of everything Anakin is carrying that has his name on it. He puts his hand on Anakin's shoulder. Go home, he said. The war ends without a sound. Not literally, the aftermath of the Battle of Coruscant produces considerable sound. The logistics of standing down 3 years of galactic conflict, generating its own sustained roar of transmissions and orders and emergency sessions, and the specific bureaucratic noise of a republic trying to remember what it looked like before it was at war. But the moment of ending, the actual threshold, passes without ceremony. Separatist command scatters within 6 hours of confirmation that both Dooku and Palpatine are dead. The leadership structure that held the Confederacy together was never ideology, was always two men, and without them the machinery runs for a while on inertia, and then it simply stops. Clone inhibitor chips come out in sequence across the fleet, battalion by battalion, ship by ship, the surgical teams working through rotation schedules that will take weeks to complete, but begin immediately, the first procedures logged before the council meeting ends. The clones themselves are told what the chips were, what they were designed to do. Most of them receive this information with the particular stillness of soldiers who have learned to process catastrophic news quietly, and then they return to duty, and the chips come out, and the number of men in the galaxy capable of being ordered to kill a Jedi without choosing to declines steadily toward zero. Anakin's resignation from the Order is tendered formally, in writing. The morning after the council session, the council accepts it the same day. There is no tribunal, no punishment proceeding, no extended deliberation. What there is instead is a ceremony, small, unannounced, attended by the 11 remaining masters and Obi-Wan and nobody else, in which Anakin Skywalker is formally thanked, by name, on the record, for the specific and irreplaceable service of ending a war and exposing a Sith infiltration that the Order failed to detect for a decade. Mace Windu presides. He shakes Anakin's hand at the end of it. Doesn't say anything. Doesn't need to. The handshake carries what Windu needs it to carry, and Anakin receives it. And that is enough. Obi-Wan walks him out. They stand in the corridor outside the council chamber, and the silence between them is the easy kind, the silence of people who have said the important things and don't need to fill the space with anything else. Below them, through a window, Coruscant goes about its afternoon, the traffic lanes flowing, the light off a million surfaces. The city that never registers its own noise because it has never known anything else. "You'll visit," Obi-Wan said. "Not a question." "Constantly," Anakin said. "You won't be able to get rid of me." "I know." Something in Obi-Wan's expression shifts, the careful composure moving aside for a moment. Something warmer and less managed underneath it. The face of a man who spent 10 years calling this person his student and has only recently located the more accurate word. "Whatever you saw," he said. "Whatever happened to me." In the other version. Anakin waits. "I'm glad," Obi-Wan said, "that this is the version." He doesn't say anything else. He goes back through the chamber door, and Anakin watches it close, and stands in the corridor for a moment with that sentence, letting it be what it is. Then he goes to find his wife. Padmé's apartment is on the 550th floor of a building in the Senate district, and it looks in the late afternoon the way it always looked in the late afternoon. The windows facing west, the light coming in at a low angle. Everything in the room the particular color of an hour before sunset on Coruscant, when the smog and the city light and the actual sun combine into something that is not quite any of them individually. He has the access code. He has always had the access code. He stands outside the door for a moment with his hand near the panel and understands that his body is doing something it hasn't had permission to do in 23 years. The shaking is not fear. It is the specific physical expression of the distance between what was and what is, a gap he has been crossing since the elevator, step by step, and is now standing at the far edge of. One door between him and the rest of it. He enters the code. The door opens. She is standing at the window. She has been watching the news. The holodisplays are still running behind her. The feeds cycling through coverage of the Battle of Coruscant's aftermath, the Chancellor's death, the end of the war. All of it presented in the breathless register of journalists who understand something historic has happened and are still assembling the shape of it. She turned toward the door when it opened, and she is looking at him now with an expression that has crossed 3 or 4 different territories in the last 2 seconds, and is still moving. She is wearing blue, her hair is down, she is alive. That is the primary fact, the one his entire body registers before anything else. Before her expression, or the blue, or the hair, or the sound, the door made closing behind him. She is alive and standing in afternoon light, and looking at him, and the gap between the version of the universe where she died on an operating table, in a facility on Polis Massa, and this one is uncrossable in words. So he doesn't try to cross it in words, he crosses the room instead. She meets him halfway. He holds her with the specific care of a man who knows exactly what it means to not be able to do this, who has lived the full measure of that absence, carried it in a black suit for 23 years, let it be the last thing he thought about every night in a meditation chamber, on a ship that never felt like anywhere. His arms around her, her face against his shoulder, the warmth of her, the specific weight of her, the sound of her breathing. He does not speak, neither does she. The holodisplays behind them continue their breathless coverage. The Republic is reorganizing. The Senate is convening emergency sessions. The clone army is standing down in sectors. Across the galaxy, A war that began in a battlefield on Geonosis is ending in logistics and communications and the slow mechanical work of disengagement. 3 years of momentum finding the threshold where it becomes stillness. Padmé's hand moves to the back of his neck. "You're shaking," she said. Into his shoulder. "I know." "Anakin," she pulls back enough to look at his face. Her eyes move across it the way they always do when she is trying to read him. Not the public face, the one he learned to wear in halls and council chambers and briefing rooms, but the one underneath, the one that has only ever been available in rooms like this one. She finds what she's looking for. She doesn't look away from it. "How bad was it?" "It's over," he said. "That's not what I asked." He looks at her. This woman who was senator at 14, who argued on the floor of the Republic Senate for peace while a war assembled around her, who faced down invasion and assassination attempts and 3 years of a galaxy trying to consume itself, and did it without flinching, because she decided, early and completely, that the things worth protecting were worth every cost the protection required. He owes her the truth. He has always owed her the truth and spent 3 years paying in installments, in half measures, in the things he couldn't say, because saying them would require explaining everything, and explaining everything was a risk he was too afraid to take. He is not afraid of that anymore. "I need to tell you something," he said. "It's going to take a while." "I have time," Padmé said. "The Senate's convening at 6th hour. I have until 5th. Something in her expression shifts, the political precision moving aside, the woman underneath it making a quiet decision about what the priority is. "The Senate can wait." He almost smiles. He tells her. Not all of it. All of it would take days, and there are things in the telling that he will need to approach gradually, in the right order, in the right light, things that will require her to hold weight he doesn't yet know how to hand over cleanly. But the shape of it, the honest shape, what he saw, what he carried back, what he chose, and why, and what it cost. She listens. That is the thing about her that he forgot. In the long years, in the drift and the grief and the hardening, how completely she listens. Not waiting for the space to respond, actually listening, actually present, her full attention given to what he's saying, as though it is the only thing in the room, which in this moment it is. The light in the apartment moves through gold and into something softer as the hour changes. When he finishes, she is quiet for a long moment. Then she takes his hand and places it against her abdomen, against the place where the change is not yet visible, not yet legible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. He feels it in the Force, before he feels it any other way. 2 presences. Small, very close together, very new, the particular quality of something that has not yet become anything except possibility, potential so concentrated it registers like heat, like light. Like both of those things at once. He knows these presences. He has known them. In another life, at the end, in the last moment before the end, felt them through the Force as the final evidence that something he built out of loss and grief and 23 years of wrong choices had nevertheless, somehow, produced something worth the whole cost of it. He knows their names. He does not say them yet. That is for later, for the right moment, for the quiet conversation between a mother and a father about who their children will be given the chance to become. There is time for that. There is time for all of it. His hand rests there, her hand over his. 3 years later, Naboo, the lake house in the late afternoon, the water going gold and the hills behind it purple in the long light. The kind of light that painters try to catch and mostly fail at, because it only exists for 20 minutes, and it is doing 7 things simultaneously, and no medium fully holds all 7 at once. Luke is 4. Leia is 4. They were born in a medical suite on Coruscant with Anakin present, and no tragedy attached to the occasion, no foresight clouded by terror. No exhausted mother fading while a father stood helpless in a corridor a world away making the worst choice of his life. They were born, and they were named, and they came home to a house where both their parents live under the same roof, and none of it is a secret. Luke is at the water's edge throwing rocks with the focused intensity of a small person who has decided that this is the most important work currently available. Leia is explaining to a garden bird why it is wrong about something, in a tone that suggests she expects the bird to concede the point shortly. Padmé is inside. He can hear her through the open window, on a comm call with her Senate office, her voice carrying the particular cadence of a woman who is simultaneously managing a legislative amendment and keeping half her attention on two 4-year-olds near water. Anakin sits on the steps. He looks at his hands. Both of them. Resting on his knees in the late afternoon light, unhurried, with the particular quality of hands that have nothing they urgently need to do at this moment. The left hand, the childhood scar below the index finger, the knuckles, the tendons, the faint pulse at the wrist, steady, animal, the body keeping itself alive without anyone's instruction. The right hand in its glove, familiar, his, the prosthetic he has worn for 6 years now and which fits differently than it did before, more easily, less like something imposed and more like simply a part of what he is. He flexes both sets of fingers. They move. Luke says something at the water's edge, not to Anakin, to the water, the specific running commentary of a 4-year-old who has opinions about where rocks land. Leia's bird has apparently conceded the point and departed, and she is now making her way up the bank toward the steps, with the purposeful stride of someone who has finished one task and is already identifying the next. She arrives at his knee, looks up at him. "What are you doing?" she said. The inflection of a person who has never once needed a question mark, because the expectation of an answer is sufficient. "Sitting," Anakin said. She considers this, finds it adequate, climbs onto the step beside him and sits in the same orientation, looking out at the water, at her brother at the edge of it, at the hills going purple in the long light. They sit there together. Padmé's voice comes through the window, precise and warm, the particular music of her in the middle of work she believes in. Luke shouts something triumphant at the water. A bird crosses the light above the lake, very high, going somewhere with the unhurried certainty of a thing that knows exactly what it's doing. Anakin breathes in, out, both lungs. This is the version. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.